review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. She's a brain balance shift program officer and brain health expert, and the author of the book Back on Track, no other than Dr. Rebecca Jackson.
Thanks for having me, Daniel.
Welcome to Book 101, Dr. Rebecca, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Yeah, but first and foremost, I'm a mom. I've got two kids that are teenagers these days. I'm married. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina. So I love, you can see behind me, it was a beautiful blue sky day today. We've got great weather here
Yes.
in North Carolina. Um, so we spend a ton of time outside and active as a family. And then professionally, I am Chief Programs Officer for a company called Brain Balance, where we specifically, my role is to help build, design, evolve programs that are holistic, integrative programs to build stronger, healthier, more connected brains to make a difference in everyday life. So that's a little bit about me.
Doc- yes, Dr. Rebecca Jackson, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world. What does it mean for a child to be off track, and how can parents recognize the signs?
You know, life is complex. We have, when it comes to development, development doesn't all happen linearly. We don't develop all aspects of development at the same rate and pace. Sometimes there's pops in development and plateaus. Sometimes we have a surge in social emotional development, but maybe not a surge in other area. So to me, getting back on track as a parent is being able to identify when something isn't optimal for your child. You know your child so well as a parent. So when you have that gut feeling of, I know they're capable of more, or this feels harder than what it should be. To me, those are red flags that, hey, we might have an opportunity to be aware and accelerate aspects of development so that we've got a child whose development aligns with their biology. So if they're 10, that they have the age appropriate development of a 10-year-old to meet the demands and expectations that are placed on a 10-year-old in the classroom, in social and sports, at home. So it's rising to meet the challenges. Um, so the development is prepared to do so.
Dr. Rebecca, how is your book different from other parenting or child development guides?
You know, I find so often that they're focused on one area. Maybe it's behavior, or maybe it's a symptom of attention or anxiety. But when it comes to us as humans, there's so many different facets and so many different aspects. And so this book is really looking at what are the age appropriate developmental milestones, not just for toddlers and not just in one or two categories, but looking at what is age appropriate development from birth to 18, and then in looking at it in all categories. So what does social emotional development look like? How do we handle, what is age appropriate for how we handle frustrations and upsets? What does appropriate development look like for attention? So looking at everything from sensory processing, motor coordination, learning, social emotions. It's really taking a holistic global look at development and looking beyond just the milestones that we read about for toddlers. I wrote the book that I wanted to find as a parent that I didn't have. I couldn't find it, so I needed to source from many different experts to pull this together all in one concise resource.
Dr. Rebecca, what age groups does your book specifically address, and how do the strategies adapt as kids grow?
Yeah, you know, the book is grouped into, I think about them as littles, middles, and bigs. And so looking at our littles in those infants to toddler developmental years, and then as kids get into those elementary school ages, and then also looking into middle school and high school. Development is still taking place through those years. So we still have an opportunity to accelerate development and support and enhance development. That, you know, their outdated thinking was that we only had a short window of time to truly change the brain. We now know that we can change the brain at any age. So it's never too late, even if you've got a middle school or high school student. you can still make an impact on development. And I forget the second half of your question. Remind me.
No worries. And can you share a personal story or case that influenced your approach in the book?
Yeah, so many stories during the pandemic. All of a sudden, I we had floods of phone calls at Brain Balance, friends and family from all over the country, international parents. All of a sudden were seeing there was just heightened struggle. The pandemic was really a time that it was just a catalyst for pouring fuel on the fire of existing challenges and struggles. So suddenly, parents had a different level of awareness. So maybe they were seeing what their school day looked like for their child for the first time because the child was doing school from home, or maybe because of changes in day-to-day functioning that went on for many months, that there was a very real impact on that child. And I kept sitting back. I kept waiting for the news and waiting for information. And I was a media guest doing a lot of segments at that time, answering questions around how to support kids during this time. And I kept waiting for somebody to come in with the hope and the help. What can we do to make a difference when kids are struggling right now? And what is it about pandemic time that really became such a catalyst? And after sitting back and waiting for somebody to step forward with that information and having it not happen, I decided that I needed to contribute to the conversation, because I saw that when we change how we function day to day, there was a very real impact on a child's development. Our movement and our sensory stimulation is really what drives our development. So when we reduce physical activity and sensory stimulation and variability for kids, it has a negative impact on development, whether it's a pandemic time or not. So, how did we take that time and opportunity to learn from it and then apply those lessons to every day going forward? So, simple examples of, if you've got a child who's struggling with anxiety, maybe they've got stomach aches in the morning and they're doing anything and everything they can to get out of going to school. Anxiety can happen when the brain isn't processing sensory information appropriately. So you don't trust your environment. You're not as relaxed and calm in your body. And anxiety is complex, there's a lot of factors to it. But if we have an opportunity to mature the sensory system through daily stimulation and activities that can bring calm to the body, allowing the brain to process information more effectively, then by working some lifestyle things into our daily life, I may have an opportunity to minimize my child's worry and fears and anxiety that might be impacting their ability to learn in the classroom or their willingness to go over to a friend's house to do something new and different. So it's what can we do in our daily lives that can have an impact on the brain and development, so that our kids get to spend less time putting energy and effort into the challenges and more time into doing the things that they love and learn.
Very well said, Dr. Rebecca. Beautifully articulated. How do you help kids build emotional resilience through the guidance you offer?
So, emotional resilience, when it comes to our emotions and our thoughts, it's really important to understand that every thought that we have, every emotion we experience, comes from networks and connections in our brain. So, when I think a thought, it's a set pattern of nerves firing that puts words into my head or puts an emotion into my experience or into my being. And one of the things that's really important to understand is the line "think happy thoughts" is good and well meaning, but if my brain does not have what it needs, if it doesn't have the resources it needs in that moment, trying to think happy thoughts is so much more difficult. So we need to take a step back to ask ourselves the question, when it comes to our kids, when it comes to ourselves, if I'm not naturally thinking happy thoughts in this moment, a negative brain is a tired brain. And so does my brain have what it needs? So to build resilience, we need to think about, what does the brain need to perform in this moment? Has my child gotten enough sleep? Have I provided fuel that's good, healthy fuel to provide the energy that the body needs to perform? Am I able to reduce some of the stress pieces? And so we naturally will utilize our happy thought networks and pathways in the brain and our happy hormones when the brain is in an adequate position. And so that's start by putting the brain in a position to naturally be more positive, and then know to look for the red flags. So I know in myself, if I wake up in the morning and I'm cranky and irritable, before I do anything else, I ask myself, for me, I need sleep, I need caffeine, I need food, I need a plan for the day. So if I'm negative, what can I do and alter in that moment that can impact how I feel? Maybe I don't have time to go back to bed to get more sleep, but can I take 20 minutes to go exercise because that's going to give my brain a burst of energy? So the book really digs into taking a step back. It's not just about how do I act in the moment, but what are the precursors that lead to setting me up for success in that moment? And then what do I have the ability to control in a world and a life where there's so little we can control? So, really looking at age appropriate strategies for all of the age groups in ways to set yourself and your child up for success so that you can have the emotional resilience and you can pivot if needed.
Dr. Rebecca, how important is routine and structure in helping kids thrive?
It's really important, and it becomes even more important at different ages. The younger we are developmentally, the more we often really crave structure. When you don't know what to expect, there can be feelings of unease. And so if you think about a young child that maybe doesn't have the full language capability to understand everything happening around them, or doesn't have the big picture understanding of how all of these different activities and things in life all fit together, providing structure can give comfort so they can relax in the moment and they're not worried about what's coming next. And then structure also gives us the opportunity to be intentional about the good things that we want to work into our day. There's a lot that's going to happen naturally. Young kids naturally are going to move. They're also naturally going to gravitate towards technology. So, what are some intentional things that we can put into our daily structure to make sure that we're developing other pieces of their brain and body that are also important? So, I mentioned earlier the importance of movement and sensory integration, sensory processing. So, being really intentional about, if every day we spend a couple dedicated minutes before or after dinner, playing freeze tag in the front yard, going for a walk, going for a bike ride. It doesn't need to be big, fancy, expensive things. Just having a simple plan of when am I going to set time aside to connect one on one with my child without distractions? When are we going to be intentional about making sure that we're providing a varied sensory experience? And so I love, something as simple as going barefoot and coming inside and outside barefoot. That's going to give your feet different sensory input than if you're always in socks all the time. So that structure gives us an opportunity to plan, to say, here's where throughout an entire week I can work in some different sensory experiences, some different movement experiences, some different social interaction experiences, so that at the end of the week or the end of a month, you've checked a lot of boxes in providing a lot of varied experiences. If we don't have that structure and don't have that plan, we get busy, we get tired, we get into our set routines, and before you know it, we're spending a lot of time on technology and less time doing the other important things that really help to drive development.
Dr. Rebecca, what are some of the early warning signs that a child may need extra support?
There's a lot of different warning signs. One thing is just watching and observing your child. If you're in a group session or a group activity, so maybe you're doing a gymnastics class, watching the movement patterns. Our movements are really foundational to higher level development. So if you've got a group of 10 kids and they're all doing jumping jacks, and you can see that 7 of the 10 kids are pretty good with their coordination, if you notice that your child's coordination is behind their peers, that can be a red flag. And it's easy for parents to want to minimize that, to say, you know what, I wasn't an athlete growing up. I don't need my child to be an athlete. That's okay. But the movement is really important foundational development. Everything builds on itself. We are not born with the executive functions that we need to thrive as an adult. It starts with early foundational, simple development. The brain learning to make those connections, and then those connections become more complex over time. So, watching movement patterns can be a simple early red flag. It doesn't mean you need to panic. It doesn't mean you need to rush out and get a diagnosis. It means watch more closely and what can I do more intentionally to make sure that we're supporting this and stimulating it. Also, the emotional regulation piece. When there is aspects of development that may be behind, that might have some gaps in development, we can see the child being more reactive. And what I mean by that is there's going to be tantrums or upsets that happen more frequently, that last longer, that are bigger. We expect tantrums and meltdowns in 2 and 3 year olds, but we should be outgrowing that. And so if you have a child that isn't moving beyond that, that is a sign that there are some gaps in development. There is some emotional, or excuse me, not emotional, but there's some immaturity in development that is coming out in those frustrations and upset. So again, it's not a time to panic. You use that information as power and as a tool to say, I'm going to watch more closely. And it's also really important to understand that nothing in the brain happens in isolation. The brain is so interconnected and so complex. So if you are aware of a gap in development or a delay or a concern in one area, other areas are going to be impacted as well. And so don't ignore that gut feeling or those early red flags. If a teacher comes to you to say, hey, I want to share, something that I'm seeing, as a parent, it's hard to hear that, especially if the very first time you hear it. Listen, ask questions, dig deeper, file it away. Teachers, more often than not, truly have your child's best interest at heart.
Dr. Rebecca, do you offer any tools or worksheets to help track progress or guide conversations?
Yeah. Throughout the book, in every single chapter, there are age appropriate milestones. So you can look through to say, if, and I love reading the book first with one color pen. So going through to check off where is your child currently. So going through each of the 9 chapters to say, okay, when it comes to motor development, checking off the milestones that they've achieved. When it comes to sensory, checking off the behaviors or observations you've made there. When it comes to handling worries and anxieties, social interactions. And then after spending some time implementing some of the strategies and tools, couple months, 3, 6 months later, going back to the book with a different color pen and looking at those same milestones. Where to you today? Can your child achieve some additional milestones that they weren't achieving previously? So this is a book that it was really written so parents can go back to this book to reference it over and over each year, taking a look at the different areas of development. Where are you today? Where do you want to go? And how are you going to get there? So this is a book that you want to read with a pen and a highlighter and take notes in and circle and star and earmark pages, so that you can go back, so that you're always supporting that forward movement and forward momentum for your child.
Miss Rebecca or Dr. Rebecca, as a brain balance shift program officer and brain health expert and an author, what would be your short term and long term goals?
You know, short-term goal is any life that I get to have an impact on and making a difference. There's nothing more rewarding or fulfilling to me when somebody reaches out to share. And I love hearing the stories and feedback from parents, but even more than that, I love hearing, in the words of the kids, the differences they notice in themselves. They're so real and so honest. So when a child says to me, I don't annoy people as much anymore. When somebody tells me to stop, I can stop now. Knowing the difference that can make for a child in their sense of self and their confidence and their ability to control and regulate. So short term is any life or family or child I get to have an impact on. It's why I put the work in that I did. And long term, it's understanding brain health. Our brain health dictates our quality of life. It's our ability to learn and interact. Brain health is not just about aging and cognitive decline and pathology. Brain health impacts our mental health, our mood, our emotions. And the more I learn through the work I do and publishing research on improving cognition, improving executive functions, the more I realize we have the ability to be proactive. We can take an active stance in our brain health to say, how can I optimize things for today that's going to minimize concerns down the road, and not wait for a symptom or pathology. And so I love long term being a part of this global conversation, bringing more awareness to the importance of brain health and what we can do in our daily lives, in simple strategies like I shared in the book Back on Track. There's also, more involved support, like through the program, our Brain Balance programs that we offer. Um, so my long term is, how do we have a global impact on this? How do we continue to raise awareness and empower people to have, an active role in their brain health and quality of life?
Good luck to your goals, Dr. Rebecca, and looking for more success. Before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please to listen to my other podcast, people, because my abstract poetry or abstract essay is already in fifth season, and abstract poetry is in second season, and Book 101 review in its fifth season as well, Comedy 101 second season, and Food 101 in its fifth season as well, Geography 101 and Love Letters in its third season, and my baby podcast, Mental Health 101, and Movie 101 Review and Music 101 in its fourth season. People, so please do listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Dr. Rebecca, if there's one message you hope every readers walk away with from Back on Track, what would it be?
That you can take an active role in how you feel and function, and for your child. Brain health is everything, and daily lifestyle and things that we do can make a difference.
Indeed, people, let's listen to Dr. Rebecca Jackson for our brain health. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world, Dr. Rebecca. And we are hoping for more and more and more empowering books like this to come. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your book itself?
Yes, you can.
Where they can find your book, Miss or Dr. Rebecca?
You can find the book on Amazon.com or Barnes and Noble. Anywhere online you buy books, you'll be able to find Back on Track, a practical guide to help kids of all ages thrive.
Yes, people, let's support Dr. Rebecca Jackson because if you support her, as I said, more and more and more empowering book for kids to come. So, Miss Rebecca, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
More people, see you soon.